Mike, for those who don't, because I had understood RICO was RICO's originally the federal. There was the federal version happened first, right?
It's racketeering,
right? But it was created. It was created to fight the mob.
You hear it mostly associated with.
I'm going to be dumb and say, what is racketeering? Because I don't even know what racketeering is and how this applies. So
yes,
okay.
Mike, what is racketeering?
Basically, it's a way that they can indict a large number of people together. And they look into basically that they're kind of a joint enterprise or joint action together. So, where normally you'd get an indictment that's one person getting charged, the other indictments he's gotten were all him alone getting charged. And the grand jury looked at the issue of whether or not he deserved to, for them to go forward. This time they brought a whole group of people. And when you look at the chart, and I've seen the chart, I saw it in the Trib today, I've seen it in a couple of newspapers, it is incredible who's all involved in this and the number of lawyers that they've got tied up in this too. And what that does is that really separates him from his lawyers because they've got their own problems to deal with because of their own indictments, their own part of the RICO action.
Right.
So there's 18 others indicted with him. So that group, then, that's racketeering. When you do a criminal enterprise and it's a way to, then you get charged with racketeering because you work together for the racket.
You have to prove they were acting in consort to do something criminal, so that their actions were done in a way that they were all involved in. And that's why when you look at the chart, there's different things that people are charged with, but overall they're all charged with the same thing, which is basically trying to overthrow an election.
Well, and Mike, so what would be the distinguishing factor between something that is a RICO versus a garden variety conspiracy case?
Well, you wouldn't get an indictment on a garden variety conspiracy case. You just have individual indictments for, whatever you did wrong. You'd have a murder indictment or you'd have a drug dealing indictment. But in this circumstance, they're charging people for acting together to come out with some result, which is to basically overthrow the election or at least overthrow Georgia's part of the election. It's incredible how much Georgia has changed in the last 2 years. I mean, from a state that, has basically been red to, holy cow, they're leading the charge in a number of ways. They're leading the charge in the Senate. They're leading the charge in the indictments and this RICO action.
Yeah.
Okay. And included in these folks that were indicted are Trump's own lawyers. Correct. Several of his own lawyers. So that Sidney Powell person, but a couple others. John Eastman, besides Giuliani, which I don't know if he's anyone's lawyer. I don't even know what that was. But besides Giuliani and Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, there are 3 attorneys that Sidney Powell that I think folks knew, John Eastman and Kenneth Chesbro. And one of them, they're alleging tried to break into some into voting machines to change the vote totals. One of the lawyers.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some of the people some of the 19 people in listening to this indictment and are not known to most people before because they took part in things like breaking and hacking into a computer system for that they and someone the people harassing Ruby Freeman, the election worker, which I mean on that actually made me very happy that that situation was terrible.
So do you here's a question with the RICO, because I've heard some other legal experts, not as good as you, Mike, that have said it's a little more difficult or it's a little heavier doing the RICO approach. Is that harder? Like if one person is found innocent, does the whole racket fall apart? Do you have to find everybody guilty? Or why are they saying that?
You have to get the charge that they're acting in consort to basically get the RICO action to work. Okay. But yeah, that's the problem with it is as your pieces fall away. Now, what happens generally in a RICO action is that people get brought, that the lower level people generally end up turning on everybody else.
Yeah. That makes sense.
So you get those people locked in with lighter sentences or with immunity, and then they squeal on everybody on what they do. I mean, you've got the impersonation, you've got breaking into machines. You got some incredible things that it's unbelievable what they're looking at here in Georgia.
Yeah, some of the speculation that the legal analysis that I've heard is that most likely you won't in the end have 19 people on trial because you have that many people, and it's worth that many people, like, and some of them will want to make deals, especially if you're not Donald Trump and have an endless spigot of like donors, campaign donors like giving you money, like you got to figure this out. It's like in the Jack Smith indictment on the overturning the election, that one, like, there are unindicted co-conspirators that are named or that are they're described. They're not named. Here, like, so, like, what is your sense of? Because one of the things people noted is that Mark Meadows does not appear in the Jack Smith one at all. So the speculation was that his lawyer made a really good deal for him because he's not even listed as an unindicted co-conspirator. Here, he is an indicted member of the racket, and. Do you think that was like bad lawyering on his lawyer's part or something? Like, because but if he sang to the feds, can't Fani Willis then use that? And she's not bound by any agreement they made with him, is she?
No, she wouldn't be bound by any agreement, but they may know that as far as what the agreements are and what he'll say. They need him because he's a real important part in tying everything together. And so they need to make sure they put all the pieces together. Now, to me, what's going to be interesting about this is you've got the head person who's probably never going to ever take a deal. I mean, I expect he'll ride the publicity and try everything. And when that happens, I don't know what they're going to end up having to do with everything if a bunch of people turn, but they're still looking at going to trial overall because Trump won't ever take a deal.
So politically, this was interesting because, of course, the former president came out and said, I think it's going to happen. Supposedly Tuesday, he's releasing a large, detailed, but irrefutable report on the presidential election fraud, which took place in Georgia.
That's a terrible
He said
idea.
it's almost complete. Yep. And it will, Monday at 11 a.m. next week in Bedminster, New Jersey. Okay. So first of all, I'm not sure who put together the report because most of the lawyers are being indicted. And right? Like Sidney Powell and all these other lawyers were supposedly the ones that were doing the investigation, Giuliani. We over and over again, they've released like pieces of this report where they were just so off. I remember they released Michigan, like their detailed reports of Michigan, and they had a bunch of counties and townships and precincts that were from Minnesota. I remember because they had a bunch of Wright County precincts in there and saying the votes are off. And it's like, well, first of all, Wright County voted overwhelmingly for Trump. They're not in Michigan. And also, like, we have a 96% turnout rate. That's right. We do have high turnout. We always have high turnout. You're welcome, Republicans. And so like, I don't even, and so first of all, would you as a lawyer allow him to release something on Monday? Or do they just not have any say in this? This seems very dangerous what he's going to do. Or maybe it's not because it's all bull.
Two things. You missed this legislator did trade Wright County to Michigan. This past legislature.
They've not been watching the help. They've been asleep at the wheel since I left, Mike.
But what he does versus what the lawyers say he should do, he does whatever the heck he wants. And I would expect that the report, with these indictments, they've got to be putting a handle on this, whatever comes out, because of what it could be used against him. But I don't know. That hasn't stopped him. And, they've come out with other things. And, he got sued because of what he said about the New York case that he didn't testify in after he got the verdict against him. And it's just he loves the publicity and he makes a lot of money off it. He raises tons of money off of these things.
Right.
Well, I'm gonna defend the Trump legal team here in one aspect. Whichever of his attorneys wrote the non-disclosure agreement for Sean Spicer, that thing appears to be ironclad.
Really?
And they did a hell of a job on it.
Good point. He's never talked.
He can make a lot of money and he's not.
Yeah.
It's interesting that, there are 30 unindicted co-conspirators in this one.
Right.
And I just thought it was so interesting. The first act they talked about was 5 days before the election, Trump was talking to an unindicted co-conspirator. So you have to imagine someone who's cooperating. Right. And he drafted a speech where he was going to say, we can't believe the results of this election. And it's like, oh my, like,
right. And
so that goes to intent, right? Like,
right.
Well, you always have a couple different speeches.
You always
have a speech.
I need a win, a lose, and a stolen.
But Mike, I was going to ask you, like, so put yourself in, like, say one of the lower level people in this indictment, and like, if you're representing them, what would your approach be, like, with Fani Willis?
You're looking at going to prison. And so with some of these charges, I mean, you're looking at really significant issues, with the rights you're going to lose if you get convicted. So
you would say
I think they got to look hard at that.
Yeah.
So your advice would be like, we need to go in and cut a deal.
Well, I tend to not represent snitches, but that might be the situation.
You heard it here.
You heard it here, people. He doesn't.
You're gonna snitch. Don't call Mike
Bryant.
You know what,
Bradshaw and Bryant.
Mike, this is a better advertisement than the copy we have for you here. Like, Mike Bryant does not represent snitches.
That's amazing.
Mike Bryant.
We'll
says
change the copyright immediately.
That's those guys over at Sieben, Gross, and Van Holten.
You can call them if you want to.
If you want to, a dirty rat. You just
That was hardcore.
I'm definitely hiring you if I get in trouble.
Yeah,
you'll be like, "Do you think I should?" No, I don't.
No, I don't.
But in general, you think that the lower level people charged in this are probably getting legal advice that, like, we got to figure something out. Like, we need to figure out a settlement.
With what they're looking at, what they've been drug into, lawyers are looking at losing their license. There's already a couple lawyers that have lost license for what they've done in these cases around the country. So, there's a lot of implications. And, it's one thing to support a candidate or support a position, but holy cow, to have your whole career go down because of somebody else doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So the governor of Georgia spoke out and distanced himself in a very big way. In fact, he actually captured the Trump tweet and said the 2020 election in Georgia was not stolen, period. For nearly 3 years now, everyone with evidence of fraud has failed to come forward, which is true, right? Yeah. They've never even really had any actual proof. So this report on Monday, I'm guessing, will not happen, or it'll be like bits and pieces. Like it will, he'll maybe what he'll do is he'll stand beside a stack of papers and go, "Here's the report. I'm exonerated."
Like when he was putting everything in a blind trust. All these papers are going to put it in a blind trust.
We're going to put it. This is going to be. But anyway, he said that we'll fail. The elections in Georgia are secure, accessible, and fair, and will continue to be as long as I am governor. The future of our country is at stake in 2024, and that must be our focus. And I think that's a good turn also, because here's the deal: we know that Georgia was lost. Both. What's her name? Kelly was probably going to lose, but David Perdue was in a runoff that followed the 2020 election, and because of fears by Republicans that the election is stolen, stoked entirely by Donald Trump, I believe that's why David Perdue lost. He had won, but he'd won by not quite enough. So there was the runoff or whatever they call it, and he lost. And I believe he cost that Senate seat without a doubt in my mind.
You also had, Herschel, run in, which he was a tough candidate, and. Beyond that, you had, it wasn't so much that, that there wasn't the lack of trust. You had Trump actually mad at them for not supporting his position that had been stolen. So he wasn't going to speak. And then there were fights about should he speak and should he support him, and then things that he said. So it just created a big mess there that, the Democrats were able to take care of. And the only person who can't win in Georgia is Stacey Abrams, no matter what,
Well, that's... she's been my spank about 27 times on the show. But closed circuit to Republicans, you can believe 100% that Trump is innocent of all this and that it's politically motivated and that he's getting the runaround, you can believe that. I don't agree with you, but you can believe that. But you cannot tell yourself that he can win Georgia as the Republican candidate. And his legal problems have nothing to do with who is the best person to represent the Republicans in the next presidential election. And until you can show me how he can win Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, these
Wisconsin.
other states that he has taken from red to pink to baby blue in some ways, until you can show me how he
Azure.
until you can show me how he can do that, you cannot convince me that one of the other fine conservative candidates that we have to choose from is not our better choice. Prove it to me.
Right.
Well, and you know, the lieutenant governor of Georgia was on CNN, and he was like, "Listen, unless all of the other candidates running against Trump stand up with one voice and say,"
exactly
he was
right.
like, "We're just going to keep." And I was
This
like,
is what
it's understandable that those people who led Georgia, who were all Republicans in 2020, are like, "Hey, get over it." You know what I mean? Like they're just like, we didn't do anything wrong.
No. It's like drawing Wright County
Yes.
into the election fraud. No, I know the county auditor. He's a nonpartisan position, but I know where he's from, and I promise you, he's probably leans more right. And also, everybody elected in Wright County leans right. I hate to tell you, there wasn't fraud perpetrated in Wright County. All those votes were real, and they all came in for Trump. By the way, I mean, it's just it's ridiculous. And there is something that, like, I'm so frustrated with the candidates running against Trump because he sits at 50-some%, right? 50-some%. And then people are like, well, can other people win? Yes, other people could win. In Iowa, he's at 44%, which tells me there's a whole bunch of Republicans that aren't willing to support him. New Hampshire's at 41%. Like, in these early states, Trump's below the threshold. But it's just, how are people supposed to vote for anybody else when you don't stand up for anything? This man's been indicted 4 times now, 4 different states, and not a single statement from his opponents going, "Hey, wait a minute, y'all. Yeah, we should be worried about this." I mean, they just don't.
Mike, we're waiting.
But none of them are bringing new people in. And the problem you got is when you're dealing with pretty much the same people, you know, Trump's got a good handle on them. Yeah. And that's where DeSantis's Trump light isn't working.
Yeah.
And never going to work. And anybody who tries to stand out gets booed by the people that are there that support him and believe he's, you know, all in the right. Yeah. And that's why he makes so much money. He's a huge money maker.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Mike, thanks for coming on.
20 years of not celebrating snitch.
4 years without snitching.
Yeah.
20 years. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. We're going to change the
phone's gonna be ringing off the hook now.
Mike Bryant, because he will not make you snitch. All right. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you, Mike.
Take care. Thanks. Yeah. Take care.